With great power comes great responsibility. I'm sure you know the line. It might be the most famous philosophical statement ever delivered by a guy wearing spandex, and this one happens to be fighting a guy dressed like a rhinoceros sometimes. But here's the thing. The philosophy of Spider-Man goes a lot deeper than responsibility, because eventually Spider-Man forces us to ask a much stranger question. Who is Peter Parker when nobody remembers Peter Parker? And that question brings us straight into one of philosophy's oldest problems. What makes you, you? Welcome to Geek Philosophy, where it's all geek to me. Let's start with the obvious. Peter Parker receives extraordinary power. He can climb walls, he's superhuman strength, he has enhanced reflexes, he's got this precognition that he calls his spider sense. But Peter learned something important. Power isn't morally meaningful by itself. What matters is what you do with that power. That's the fundamental Spider-Man philosophy, and it's remarkably close to the idea of virtue ethics. Aristotle argued that becoming a good person isn't simply about knowing the rules, it's about developing the character necessary to consistently do the right thing. And I mean, that's Peter Parker. He isn't Spider-Man because he has the powers, he's Spider-Man because he believes that powers create an obligation. He could use them to become rich, he could use them to become famous, he could just walk away from the whole thing. But he doesn't. Because Peter Parker understands something that his Uncle Ben tried to teach him. Having the ability to help creates a responsibility to help. And that principle is what makes Spider-Man heroic. It's not the webs, it's not the costume, it's not all the powers, it's that choice. And this is where things get philosophically fascinating. In Spider-Man: Brand New Day, Peter Parker makes a massive sacrifice. After the events surrounding No Way Home, Peter's secret identity is effectively restored. The world forgets that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. But there's a particularly important person who also forgets: MJ. And here's where I think we need to ask a genuinely uncomfortable question. Did Peter Parker have the right to keep his identity from her? Because MJ had previously made her wishes very clear. She didn't want Peter to erase her memories. She wanted to keep them. She wanted to know who Peter was. She wanted the truth. She wanted the choice. And Peter ultimately chooses not to tell her. Now, you can understand why. He's trying to protect her. I mean, that's classic Peter Parker. He's sacrificing his own happiness for someone else's safety. Responsibility, right? But here's the problem. There's a philosophical difference between protecting someone and making a decision for someone without their consent. And Peter may have crossed that line. This is where Immanuel Kant becomes interesting. Kant argued that human beings should never be treated merely as means to an end. People have autonomy. They get to make moral choices for themselves. And MJ's choice was taken away from her. Peter essentially says, I know what you would choose if you knew the truth, but I'm going to decide for you so that you don't have to know. That's paternalism. And paternalism gets philosophically messy very quickly because Peter's intentions are noble, but noble intentions don't automatically make an action morally right. And that's one of the most interesting things about Spider-Man. Peter Parker constantly sacrifices himself for other people. But sometimes he also sacrifices other people's agency for what he believes is for their own good. And those aren't necessarily the same thing. But Brand New Day creates an even stranger problem. Suppose everyone in the world forgets Peter Parker. Not just Spider-Man, but Peter Parker. His friends, his loved ones, his relationships, his history, all of it exists only inside Peter's own mind. So, is he still the same person? This is where we can bring the ship of Theseus, the ancient philosophical thought experiment that asks us if you gradually replace every plank of a ship until none of the original pieces remain, is it still the same ship? And Marvel actually gives us a version of this question in WandaVision.
You are familiar with the thought experiment, the ship of Theseus, in the field of identity metaphysics?
Naturally. The ship of Theseus is an artifact in a museum. Over time, its planks of wood rot and are replaced with new planks. When no original plank remains, is it still the ship of Theseus?
Secondly, if those removed planks are restored and reassembled free of the rot, is that the ship of Theseus?
Marvel's answer is basically identity is more complicated than the stuff you're made of. And Peter Parker gives us another version of the same problem. Because what if the parts of a person aren't just physical? What if some of the things that constitute your identity are relationships, memories, and the recognition of other people? If nobody remembers you, are you still you? Think about your own identity. You know you're you because you have memories. You have experiences. You have relationships with other people, and other people recognize you. They remember things you've done, they tell stories about you, they love you, they hate you, they know you. Now, take all of that away. Imagine waking up tomorrow and nobody remembers you. Your spouse doesn't remember you, your children don't remember you, your parents don't remember you, your friends don't remember you, not even your coworkers remember you. There are no photographs that mean anything to anyone. No shared memories, no one who can say, hey, that's Jeremy, I know him. Would you still be you? Of course you're going to say, well, yeah, because your internal continuity remains. You remember being you. But now we've created a fascinating philosophical tension. Is personal identity primarily something internal? Or is it partly something relational? Are you who you remember yourself to be? Or are you also who other people remember you as? Peter Parker seems to exist in this strange middle ground. Peter remembers Peter, but the world no longer does. And here's what I think makes Spider-Man such a powerful philosophical character. Peter Parker's greatest responsibility isn't actually his superpowers. It's his relationships. Uncle Ben, Aunt May, MJ, Harry, Gwen, his friends, his enemies, his community, the people he's trying to protect. Peter Parker becomes Spider-Man because he realizes that his choices affect other people. But then, Brand New Day essentially asks what happens when the people who defined those relationships no longer remember you. Peter's responsibility remains, his identity remains, his memories remain, but the social world that helped create Peter Parker has definitely been radically altered. It's almost like he's becoming a ghost haunting his own life, and that is heartbreaking. This brings us back to Uncle Ben. With great power comes great responsibility. We usually interpret that as, if you can help, you should help. But Spider-Man stories repeatedly add another layer to it. Responsibility requires sacrifice. Peter gives up money, gives up relationships, he gives up happiness. I mean, sometimes he even gives up his anonymity, and sometimes he gives up being known. That's the tragedy of Peter Parker. He doesn't simply save people. He often saves people at his own expense. And that sounds noble. But here's the philosophical warning. Self-sacrifice can become its own kind of selfishness if you decide for everyone else what they should be sacrificed from. Peter's willingness to suffer is admirable, but MJ's autonomy matters too. Sometimes responsibility means protecting someone, and sometimes responsibility means trusting them enough to let them choose. So, is Peter still Peter? I think the answer is yes, but not entirely. And that's the fun of philosophy. Peter Parker is still Peter Parker because there's a continuity of consciousness that remains in him. He remembers his life. He remembers his choices. He remembers loving MJ. And he remembers being Spider-Man. But something important has been lost. His shared identity. The Peter Parker who existed in the minds of everyone around him is gone. And that means Peter is simultaneously the same person and a fundamentally different person, just like the ship of Theseus, just like Vision. Identity isn't necessarily a single thing. It's a collection of memories, experiences, relationships, choices, and stories. But change enough of those things, and you start asking whether the person who remains is really the same person who started the journey. And maybe that's why Spider-Man endures. Because underneath all the superpowers, the villains, the multiverses, and the radioactive arachnids, Spider-Man is asking a very human question. What do I owe other people? How much should I sacrifice? When does responsibility become guilt? Can you protect someone without controlling them? And what makes me who I am? And perhaps the biggest question of all, if everyone forgets who you are, do you still have an obligation to be the person you were? Peter Parker's answer is yes, because Spider-Man is defined by whether anyone remembers him. He's defined by what he chooses to do. That's the real meaning of with great power comes great responsibility. The world doesn't have to recognize you as a hero. You don't even have to be rewarded. You don't have to be remembered, and just have to decide what kind of person you're going to be. And then accept responsibility for that choice. And maybe that's the most heroic thing about Spider-Man. Not that Peter Parker has the power to change the world, but that even when the world forgets Peter Parker ever existed, Peter Parker still chooses to be Spider-Man. And that is philosophy. This has been Geek Philosophy, where it's all geek to me. And until next time, don't just watch, think.
If you've been watching Geek Philosophy and thinking, you know what, I really should read some of these philosophy books, well, this is your sign. The Logos Philosophy Book Club makes it easy to start reading the great works of philosophy. Beautiful editions of books from thinkers like Plato, Aristotle, Nietzsche, Hume, Boethius, and so many more. And the best part, you don't have to read them alone. The Logos Philosophy Book Club gives you a community of people who are actually reading these books, thinking about these ideas, and discussing what they mean for the world we live in today. Because philosophy isn't just something that belongs in a classroom or in dusty old books. It's in the Matrix, it's in Star Trek, it's in superheroes, it's in politics, religion, science, and the choices we make every single day. So, if you want to join me in reading more philosophy, check out the Logos Philosophy Book Club using the link in the description below. And when you sign up, use my promo code Jeremy, that's Jeremy, for 15% off your subscription. And if you use my link and promo code, you'll be supporting Geek Philosophy while joining a community of people who believe that reading old books can still help us understand the way the modern world we live in works. So go check out Logos Philosophy Book Club, because the best way to understand the ideas shaping the world is to start reading the people who started the conversation. As always, don't just read, think.